Welcome to Superhero Sunday. This week, we're going to be talking about Superman Returns. This movie is actually a gem. This movie is a delight, and I don't care what anyone says. All right? So let's talk. Let's talk about this movie because I don't think it gets talked about enough for how good it is at all. Like at all. All right? So we're going to start from the top. So Superman Returns is essentially a soft reboot slash sequel of sorts to Superman the movie that starred Christopher Reeve. It's also the first movie since Superman 4 Quest for Peace. This movie chooses to ignore the third and fourth movie of the original series, making it a semi sort of sequel slash reboot to Superman the movie 1 and 2. But because I think it follows up the quintessential Superman, Christopher Reeve, Superman Returns takes hits it doesn't truly deserve. In the slightest. Honestly, Brandon Routh isn't given enough credit for the role that he has to take on here. He's forced to emulate another Superman, and not just any other Superman, but the Superman. The one most people think of as the iconic portrayal of the character. He is the peak of perfection as Superman. Christopher Reeve made the world believe a man could fly. Ralph does an incredible job of emulating the dorky persona of Clark Kent while also maintaining the formidable, confident Superman in his abilities. While he's also a complete doofus when faced with the love of his life, Lois Lane. He hides his excellent physique, he's sweet, he's charming, and he never overpowers the screen, giving the same warmth and care that Christopher Reeve brought to the role. But nevertheless, if we take this movie on its own merit, it's actually kind of mind blowing. I rewatched this movie the other day, and I decided that if it's meant to be a reboot in its own way and tell the story for itself, it actually does. If we take Christopher Reeve's movies out of the picture and let this movie just stand on its own, suddenly, I think it actually takes on a whole new light. I've always thought this movie is good. And I have no issues with it, honestly. But if I give it its own world without the context of the other movies, it actually tells a pretty cohesive story. A great story. It builds tension. It explains Superman's origins without showing the origin story. It gives context for his absence and how much he meant to the world that they're still mourning his absence 5 years later. And Lois has tried to move on with her life, but the love of her life left without any warning, leaving her pregnant and alone. Also, on a side note, I don't really like that people discuss this like deadbeat father thing when they talk about this movie because I don't think it exactly fits the narrative that's given to us. I don't think either of them knew at the time that Jason was a thing, that he existed. If Superman had known, he wouldn't have left. Not at all. And if he had wanted to go make contact with his planet, he might have taken an entirely different approach and even discussed it with Lois, knowing that there was someone else's life at stake here. Superman wouldn't have left his son. I mean, look at what he does the moment he finds out. He goes to his bedroom and delivers the same speech his father gave him, smiling so proudly and widely at Lois and Jason. You know he wants to be there going forward. So just get out of here with that. Now, Lois has tried to move on. It's taken 5 years and an article written in grief and a little bit of hate to do so, but she does. Maybe she's finally ready to move forward with Richard at that point. But then, Superman just blows back into everyone's lives. And the world is left feeling overjoyed while she's feeling mixed emotions about the whole thing. I mean, she clearly knows Jason's true father. Even Richard might know he's not the father. But Lois certainly does know who is. In the movie, she says, "How could you leave us like that?" She could be referencing the world as a whole, but she could also just be referencing herself and Jason. Screw the world. I mean, that entire interview turned into a personal conversation rather than a professional interview. I'm not even sure what she put in the article that she could, because honestly, that was more about them and their relationship than it was about his relationship to the world and where he went. But in that interaction, you can feel the history between them. She says, "I forgot how warm you are." He says, "Are you all right?" staring at Lois, regardless of the others that are on the plane that just went through the same harrowing experience. How about this one? He's going to grow up big and strong, just like his dad. That is a line literally said by Lois to Clark Kent after going through all of Jason's meds that he needs to take. She assures Clark that he'll grow up to be just like his dad, which he later proves to be true when he chucks a piano across the room. Something that Lois is surprised by, but not nearly as surprised as the henchmen around her. Because they're freaking out when they tell Lex that a piano took out one of their guys. A piano, mind you, bolted to the floor. Like, they're freaking out. And she's on the floor going, yeah. I was wondering when that was going to happen. She knew. She also then tells Superman while he's in the hospital, and I don't need to hear it to know that she told him. She used Richard as a cover. Even with Lex Luthor, when he asked about the father, notice Lois is clutching her son ever tighter when he pulls out the familiar green rock. She's nervous as it's waved in front of her son's face, and relieved when Luthor pulls away and seemingly buys the story that it's Richard and not Superman. The movie builds tension slowly as Superman adjusts to being on Earth again with all the little changes, somehow fitting in, yet not fitting in at all. And in the background, Lex, his evil plan unfolds. One that's 5 years in the making, which I also love. Lex Luthor isn't planning on ruling the world just because Superman is around. No, he's gone and he's using that to his advantage to make this plan. And side note, if you've ever read the movie book version of this, not only is Superman gone, but Luthor is the reason Superman is gone. He faked the scientist reports to get Superman off the planet so that he could enact this plan to rule the world. Like, that should have stayed in the story. Except here's the problem. Luthor sent him off to his death, hoping that Superman would never return from Krypton. But he has. Superman returns. Oops. Well, time for Plan B. Let's just, in addition to making all of this alien technology and making all of this land for me to possess and sell, I will add kryptonite to it. And not only will I have all the money and riches, but I will make this world, his only other world, poisonous to him. Like, that is utter evil. Luthor's ability to pivot plans and add in new things to accomplish what he wants while Superman is around is still pretty slick. And the actor not being a nice dude helps with the creepiness because he was disturbing in an entirely new way from any Luthor we really had before. He's creepy, he's smart, but he's also nuts, and he seems to have no morals whatsoever. He cut the brakes on one of his own people. He'd hurt a child. He'd kill a hero. He'd stab him in the back. He would make the world a place so that he can never go back again. So both of his homes, Krypton and Earth, would be poisonous to him. Yikes. This Lex Luthor is a soft-spoken kind of crazy. Like, he seems like he might not be nuts, but then he talks and does things and he's nuts. He's a madman. He has temper flares. And he's wildly crazy, but he's able to blend it in so well with seeming like a sane person. This slow build makes this movie so good. As I think movies, especially superhero ones, focus too much on CGI and fighting and special effects instead of real character moments. Lois and Luthor got to interact here. He gives her an interview, which is a perfect excuse to monologue as the villain. She's disinterested and callous towards him, all while protecting her son, showcasing two sides of the same person. We have moments where Metropolis is crumbling and Superman is faced with a choice: save Lois or save Metropolis. Clark returns home, and even as Superman and as Clark, he feels like an alien. Someone had to die for him to return to work. Lois never mentions him. Jimmy is excited to see him, but Jimmy's basically an overexcitable puppy. Clark and Richard are forced to deal with each other while searching for Lois. Looking through the computer, they both discover that her password is Superman. Each have a different meaning for both of them. They also discover how similar they are. They both knew exactly what the message meant that Lois sent, that they were coordinates, and they each raced off in their own respective way to fly there and save her. Each actor has a moment to shine and let you know exactly what the character is thinking and feeling. Because basically, from the removal of kryptonite in Superman's back on the little plane, Richard is forced to realize that while Lois clearly loves him, she's still in love with Superman, no matter what she says. She was willing to risk all their lives and then her own to rescue him. Something you cannot take lightly, considering how she tried to bargain with Luthor before just to get Jason to safety. The movie gives each character moments to breathe, to flesh themselves and their history out. It would have been amazing to see where the story went next. And although I am grateful to the Arrowverse and Brandon Routh for returning to this story once more to complete it, we learn that Lois and Clark will be married at some point, and Jason is his son, at least Clark's, if not totally known as Superman's, which is probably safer. I'm glad to have that ending, but it would have been nice to see the other movies as well, since there were supposed to be 3 of them. Superman Returns is not a perfect movie, but it's a great movie. It hits the beats of what makes Superman great. Because I love that Luthor says mind over muscle, he believes that's all Superman is. And it's why Lex can never beat him. That moment, that iconic moment when he lifts the kryptonite growing island into space, that was mind and heart fueling him, not muscle. All the people he loves, the planet he calls home, and for himself to have a chance to truly make a home for himself. That's not muscle working there. That was sheer willpower to overcome the kryptonite. To overcome anything. And that is what I love about Superman. So, thanks for listening, and I will see you next week on another episode of Superhero Sunday. Spread the love and listen on.